First of all, I want to welcome all of you. I'm Sean Lubers from the Adult Education Committee, and I just want to introduce our speaker today. Most importantly, to tell you that one of the reasons that I really wanted her to come out is because over this past summer, in the school district I work in, Chaffee Joint Union High School District, I attended one of her educational sessions for the teachers and staff. And I was just really moved by it. And I was just it was life-changing for me. And so when we were thinking about our topics this session, first person I thought of was having Nora come out and kind of share with you a little bit of what she had shared, and also kind of even a little bit more expanded level for us. And maybe even she'll be able to come back and maybe share some more, and also do some good question and answer sessions. So let me just introduce her real quick, have a short bio. Nora H. Farraj is an Arab American Orthodox Christian whose ancestral roots are from Jordan, born in Southern California, but raised in Saudi Arabia and Jordan for her schooling years. She brings with her an authentic, cultured perspective to her personal and professional relationships and experiences. Witnessing the ongoing social injustice, discrimination, profiling, and misrepresentation of Arabs and Arab Americans residing in the US has motivated her to increase awareness and raise the voices of this neglected minority. So it is my honor today to introduce her to you. She's an administrator in the district that I work in, and I've worked with her at the adult school, and I have nothing but the highest regard for her and what she brings. So without further ado, here's Nora. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Sean. Hello and marhaba. My name is Nora Harani Farraj, or in Arabic, it's Noura Harani Farraj. And I wanted to thank you for allowing me to share my own personal experiences intertwined with the complexities of my Arab American identity. By the end of this presentation, I am hoping that it allows you to understand how imperialism and colonialism continue to frame the one-sided narrative that erases Arab identity and the contributions that they have provided in all facets of societies. This narrative also distorts the truth, while also adding to negative stereotyping and media bias. I am an Arab American with Jordanian roots. My parents are both from northern Jordan, which is above the city capital Amman. And both of them immigrated in the late 1960s to Southern California. My father is a retired engineer who came to the United States through a visa lottery given to all scientists, engineers, doctors, lawyers through the second wave of immigration to the United States. I was born in Los Angeles and attended school through my second grade year when my father's company, Bechtel, an international engineering company, transferred him to Saudi Arabia. I attended Jubail Academy, and it is a school system sponsored by the US Embassy. There I developed friendships with students from all over the world and learned about their cultures. But at that time, schools only went up to 9th grade for non-Muslims in Saudi Arabia. So I moved to Jordan and lived with my grandparents. I attended and graduated from the American Communities School in Amman, Jordan. Here I am, senior president, just so you guys can see me right there. And at the same time, this school was sponsored by the US Embassy. There, I was also able to travel to over 25 countries. And that's where I was able to learn about their rich cultures and traditions, and later went to the University of Jordan. Sorry, I'm trying to show you guys here. And it is there that I met and later married my husband, Samad, in the same Orthodox church where my parents got married. Can I move this thing over? No, okay. Where my parents got married 30 years later. I then was hired as an English teacher at a private school in Amman, Jordan. So here we are in the Orthodox Church on September 1999, and my parents were married in the same Orthodox Church in Amman, May 30, 1969. My husband is an American with Jordanian and Palestinian roots. His father was born in 1912 in Salt, which is above the city of Amman, Jordan, and his mother was born in 1930 in Palestine, which is the village of Salfit. And Salfit is one of the two largest villages in the district of Nablus, Palestine. The Salfiti family is well known across the West Bank of Palestine and throughout parts of Israel until today, as they are active members of Palestinian, and Arab Israeli societies. Over here, you can see my mother-in-law's Palestinian passport, and here you can see the Palestinian stamp. This says Philistine, and this says the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, Al-Mamlaka Al-Urduniya Al-Hashemiyya. This is the Jordanian flag, and this is the Palestinian flag before 1948. Many American-born Arabs who marry from their ancestral homeland are seen to be too American and are actually seen as fake because of their American beliefs. Throughout my university and teaching experiences, I was seen as an outsider. I couldn't wait to come back to the United States so that I could have my identity once again. Little did I know that when I settled here, that my America would not accept me as an American, but rather a foreigner and an outsider. To them, I was a foreigner and outsider and accepted me because they saw me as a barbaric foreigner from an uncivilized region. Thus, I was lost between two cultures, a Jordan that saw me too American and an America that saw me as a foreigner from a barbaric, uncivilized region. This is a picture of the middle and high school teachers of Amman Academy, and over here you can see me. So again, two cultures, two languages, two identities, and that's me. So you're probably wondering why this animosity towards Arab Americans or even Arabs in general. In order to understand this question, I'd like to begin with an overview of imperialism and colonialism and how these two destroyed the historic countries of the Arabian Peninsula and of those of North African countries. So first of all, let's just define these two terms. We have imperialism and we have colonialism. Imperialism is a policy of extending a country's power and influence through diplomacy or military force. And I've kind of highlighted these keywords. While colonialism is an extension of this. It's the political or economic domination of one group by another, usually through the establishment and maintenance of colonies within a seized territory, which produces the dynamic of an oppressed indigenous majority and an oppressive foreign minority. I really enjoyed working on this presentation and looking for political cartoons and came across this one. This is called The Two Partners. Over here, you can see France being represented, and we have here the lion being Britain. And over here, you'll see this little coconut is actually Egypt. And it's very hard maybe for you to see this, but basically this political cartoon regards European imperialism in regards to Egypt in 1885. The original caption reads, France, Sacre, when the fruit falls, you again get the lion's share, to which England replies, that's why I'm here. As you are studying and delving into the history behind European imperialism, I wanted to touch on major points that shaped what is now called the Middle East. First, British imperialism began in 1798 when French Napoleon invaded Egypt. At this time, Britain's economy was very dependent on sea and land routes to India. So what they did is their navy collaborated with the Ottoman authorities to evict the French troops from Egypt. In 1882, Britain occupied Egypt until 1922, but did not withdraw completely until 1956. By the time the British troops left Egypt, Egyptians had the lowest illiteracy rates in the region. Mandates were part of the colonization process. Britain and France divided up the region to suit their own imperialistic interests. Thus, they drew imaginary lines in the sand in order to suit their interests. And with this, a new term was coined, known as the Middle East. Rather than it being the Southeast, they called it the Middle. It is the middle of the East that gave access to European resources in the Eastern, Mediterranean, and North African region. So if we look here, what happened with these mandates? For the British, they received Palestine and Jordan, Iraq, and Egypt, while the French received Syria, Lebanon, North Africa, including Algeria. They both agreed that in keeping these mandates, they should try to prepare these regions for eventual self-rule. But no date was actually given for this independence. And for them, Palestine was actually a different kind of mandate. In the Balfour Declaration laid out a framework for Zionist administration and settlement for Jewish immigration. There was actually no self-determination for the territory's indigenous inhabitants who were overwhelmingly Christian and Muslim. The declaration by then Foreign Secretary was included in a letter to Lord Walter Rothschild, a leading proponent of Zionism, a movement advocating for self-determination for the Jewish people in their historical homeland, from the Mediterranean to the eastern flank of the River Jordan. And what's interesting here is, while you read this, His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, and will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object, it being clearly understood, and if I could highlight here, I would show you, but clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine. And this here was lost later on, or the rights and political status enjoyed by Jews in any other country. And this was November 2nd, 1917. The creation of Israel is part of a bigger foreign policy held by the US towards the Middle East. We can refer to it as the modern post-World War I leading into World War II, imperialism and colonialism, what we like to call Part 2. There are three main interests according to the US foreign policy, and you can find this on the US state government website. Number one, ensuring the free flow of oil from the Gulf. Number two, guaranteeing the survival and security of Israel, which actually amounts to over $3.8 billion a year given to Israel, and limiting the influence of the former Soviet Union. And many see this as a double standard, as many presidents have said they want to rid the Middle East of weapons of mass destruction, yet they don't mention that Israel actually holds nuclear armaments. But this did not end, though, with advocating for the persecution of Palestinians and the mass exodus from their ancestral homeland. As you recall, there are actually two key Arab countries that have been on America's political agenda. And these are two countries that were, before the war, self-sustaining and did not need any Western influence. And of course, these are two countries that are very high oil producers. Namely, let's begin with Iraq. Iraq is actually part of the cradle of civilization, and it was called ancient Mesopotamia, where civilization began. Before the war, there were 1 million Christians with equal rights. Baghdad, the capital city, boasted the highest number of Christians in all of the Arab region. They had a very highly educated middle class. They enjoyed economic prosperity. They were self-sustaining communities. They had large oil reserves, and this country actually supported the Palestinian refugees as well as stateless citizens with the creation of Israel in 1948. So as we look here, we can actually see what were the effects of colonialism and imperialism on Iraqis. If you recall the Gulf War, there were the first casualties that actually were harmed were the 1.5 million Christians, where less than 100,000 Christians remain. And that's as of today, there might be even less. Also, after 9/11, President Bush at the time had said that there were weapons of mass destruction and we needed to go liberate the people of Iraq. And at the same time, we needed to be able to help with terrorism, as this was after 9/11. But later on, we can see that there was actually no Iraqi who was involved in the 9/11 attacks. And at the same time, they found 0 weapons of mass destruction. By the end, we had 9.2 million refugees. There are high rates of birth defects to this day due to the bombs that were being dropped on civilians. And many of these bombs were mustard gas, which basically means these were actually foreign gases that were placed. The entire healthcare and infrastructure was destroyed in Iraq, and over 360,000 civilians were killed. And remembering that there were also Palestinian refugees living here who once again had to leave and once again were refugees. Another country that I'd like to go over is Syria. Syria is also part of the cradle of civilization. This video here from Instagram, hopefully you can hear it, will show you a little bit about Syria before the war. As you can see, the infrastructure, the architecture, Christian, Muslim. So this was before. There were 21 million Christians tracing their ancestral roots to Antioch of the Bible. In the book of Acts, chapter 11, verse 26, it says, "And the followers of Jesus were first called Christian in the city of Antioch." Syria boasted strong agriculture and oil production. They also were self-sustaining as they had the largest textile factories of nylon, cotton, and wool. 90% of the people were literate and they had very high education rates. They had natural resources of rock salt and limestone, just to name a few. And also Palestinian refugees and stateless citizens were also living there and support was there for them. This is Syria today. From the 12 million Christians, 21 million Christians we spoke of, there are less than 700,000 Christians that are there today, and maybe even less. 610,000 and more civilians have been killed. All of those mills and factories have been destroyed. We have Orthodox bishops who were kidnapped. To this day, we do not know what happened to them, and many clergy have been imprisoned and beheaded. There is a high infant mortality rate, and also the healthcare and infrastructure has been destroyed. Here you can actually see some refugees and how they escape, and they go on these boats. And there's actually a great documentary slash feature on Netflix. It's called Swimmers, and it talks about how these two swimmers from Syria end up actually becoming, one of them becomes an Olympic medalist. So I highly recommend you watch that. The leading product of US colonialism and imperialism is the plight of the indigenous Palestinians. Before 1948, Palestinians enjoyed a thriving, multi-religious society where Christians, Jews, and Muslims all coexisted with equal citizenship rights and religious autonomy under the Ottoman Empire. They ran for elections to the Ottoman parliament and represented their constituencies, living in a self-sustaining economy characterized by regional and global economic trade networks. They were indigenous to historic Palestine, oftentimes as farmers, shepherds, and skilled workers. Over here in these pictures, you can see the Jewish rabbi and the Muslim cleric speaking without any violence. Over here, you can see women and men working side by side and how they bring the wool. This is the Palestinian bride, it's called, because this is known as tatriz, which is basically embroidery of the thob, or the dress that women would wear. This right here is actually in 1944 was taken. This was the airport that was found in Lid, Palestine. And over here you can see an Orthodox Christian cleric walking through the streets of Jerusalem without any violence or any issues. I wanted to share with you this video just to give you an overview of what the Nakba, known as the catastrophe, has done to the indigenous people of Palestine.
What's that? I never heard of that. Nakba.
The catastrophe in Arabic took place in Palestine in 1948. in which more than 750,000 Palestinians were forcefully displaced from their homes and pushed into refugee camps in East Jerusalem, the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, and neighboring countries. But the Nakba didn't end in 1948. The catastrophe continues to affect more than 12 million Palestinians, who remain stateless today. Historical Palestine was mostly made up of Palestinian Muslims, Christians, and a small number of Jews, who generally lived together peacefully. The persecution of Jews across Europe led them to believe that they were not safe there, and Zionists saw Palestine as a prime location for a Jewish homeland.
And it was clear that there were Palestinians on the land. Zionist leaders and common people alike got used to the idea that the only way of making Palestine a Jewish state is by causing the Palestinians to leave.
The Jewish Zionist movement began organizing immigration and buying land in Palestine. This was the first step in turning Palestine into a Jewish homeland. Then World War I began. Britain promised Zionist support for a Jewish national home in Palestine. This came as a formal political letter known today as the Balfour Declaration. It also included that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in
Do you see that?
When World
A
War
big
I
prejudice against the other people.
Britain occupied Palestine.
Britain provided the muscle under which they could simply emigrate. I mean, they couldn't have immigrated were it not for the British presence, because the crucial battle in the early stages was simply getting Jews into Palestine and acquiring land. They couldn't have done that without British government's sponsorship.
Jewish migration into Palestine continued for decades, and the Palestinian people organized large demonstrations against this influx. Palestinians saw British support of Zionism as biased and unfair. So the people of Palestine revolted in 1936 to fight against British and Zionist occupation. During the 3-year uprising, thousands of Palestinians were killed, and hundreds of British citizens and Jewish Zionists died as well. Britain dismantled the Palestinian Revolution, leaving them with no political or military leadership. However, the British also began limiting Jewish migration. This upset the Jews who had fought with the British during the uprising and led them to create their own forces. Zionist militias carried out bombing attacks against both the British and the Palestinians. As things got out of hand, the British announced in 1947 that they'd be ending their mandate on Palestine. The file on Palestine was then transferred to the UN, which suggested dividing Palestine into an Arab and Jewish state. As the British were preparing to leave, the new Jewish population began taking over, and it helped that they were heavily armed. The ethnic cleansing of Palestinians began months before the British officially left Palestine. Zionists were taking over major cities and hundreds of villages, forcing thousands of Palestinians into neighboring countries.
It happened many times that the Israeli very holy soldiers took 10 of the youngsters in the middle of the village, shot them just in order to kill them, in order that all the others will see it and run away. And if it's not enough, they took others also.
The British ended their mandate on May 14, 1948, leaving their tanks and armored weapons to the newly created State of Israel. From the time the British occupied Palestine in 1917 to when they left in 1948, the number of Jews is estimated to have multiplied 10 times to 500,000. As Zionist Jews declared the State of Israel on May 14, 1948, the surrounding Arab nations declared war, with the objective of liberating Palestine. Although Palestine had the support of other Arab nations and they outnumbered the Jewish population, the Israelis also had foreign military, political, and financial support.
They were highly prepared, highly dedicated, well-armed, which was superior to all the Arab armies.
grew beyond the UN partition lines during the Arab-Israeli War by destroying Arab villages and further reducing the Palestinian population. By April 1949, more than 500 villages and 10 cities were captured by the Israelis. Over 750,000 Palestinians were expelled from their homes, and over 13,000 Palestinians had been killed. Even then, the Nakba did not end. Today, Israel occupies the whole of historical Palestine. Israelis continue to build illegal settlements on occupied Palestinian territories. Palestinians in the West Bank live under military law, which subjects them to checkpoints, curfews, and arbitrary arrests. Palestinians in Gaza live under a blockade imposed by Israel. Gaza is set to become unlivable by 2020. Palestinians today continue to demand their right to return to their homes. For them, the Nakba will not end until this right is granted.
So over here, just to see, the Nakba basically means the catastrophe. And it refers to the Zionist movement's ethnic cleansing campaign against the indigenous Palestinian population starting in late 1947. And that was to establish a Jewish majority state of Israel. In the Nakba, Zionist militias expelled 750,000 plus Palestinians. They destroyed and depopulated 531 Palestinian cities, towns, and villages, and committed up to 155 massacres. The Nakba was an attempted physical annihilation of Palestinian civilization and collective identity, severing ancient social and communal networks. In the face of Palestinian defiance, the Zionist movement launched Plan Dalet, which called for territorial expansion and the expulsion of its native inhabitants who had lived there for centuries by any means necessary. This resulted in mass violence against Palestinian civilians. And David Ben-Gurion, who was the first prime minister of Israel, said, "The Arabs of the land of Israel have only one function left to them, and that's to run away." 15,000 Palestinians were killed in the Nakba, over 155 massacres committed by Zionist militias. Each red dot here on this map is a Palestinian city, town, or village which was destroyed or ethnically cleansed in the Nakba. Much of the ethnic cleansing involved this massacre. Ethnic cleansing also included bulldozing homes with Palestinians inside, with 530 villages destroyed between 1947 to 1949. %80 of Palestinians who lived in the territory colonized by Zionists were actually expelled. And the state of Israel was declared on this territory on 14th of May, 1948. And that means that 4 in 5 Palestinians in this area who made up 78% of historic Palestine were expelled by 1949 in just 2 years. So over here, I wanted you to look at this narrative that you will not hear in mainstream US media or even any Western media. From an Arab perspective, the creation of Israel marked the triumph of Western colonialism over native Arabs at a time when India and much of Africa and Asia were freeing themselves from European colonial rule. The specific question of Palestine has always been a broader Arab one as well, both because of the hundreds of thousands of Palestinian refugees in several Arab countries, and because of a common history, language, and culture and politics that leads Arabs, both Muslim and Christian alike, to identify with Palestinians. As of January 2023, and that's right now, there are 144 Israeli settlements in the West Bank, including 12 in East Jerusalem. In addition, there are over 100 illegal outposts in the West Bank. And I wanted you to hear from this Nakba survivor, his perspective. Can you hear this? Are you guys able to hear this?
No.
Don't know how to.
He described how his family sought refuge in the West Bank. He slept in caves, under trees, moving from refugee camp to refugee camp before the UN eventually sent him on a ship to South America, Venezuela. Then he went to Colombia. He has since returned to his village, Sarah, but says not much remains of it, except for the shrine of Samson, which is now an Israeli tourist attraction. I spoke to Salah Mahmoud. I spoke to Mahmoud Salah on Monday, where he now lives in Chicago. And I asked him what that word, Nakba, Arabic for catastrophe, means to him.
Nakba means it is a disaster of my heart, a disaster of my family, a disaster of my soul, a disaster of my country, because it is the Nakba, it is the history of my country, of my grandfather, grandmother, and the disaster of my even faith, my religion, my school. It was destroyed. The Nakba, it is a Nakba. It is a word. It is very, very strange word, hard word. It is still in my heart, and I give it to my sons. I give it to everybody I know from the family.
So over here, you could see there are 6.8 million Jewish Israelis all throughout this region. And in these densely populated areas, this is the West Bank and this is the Gaza Strip. The Gaza Strip is actually known as a prison because it's an air prison, because here is the Mediterranean, which they can't get to because there's a blockade. And there's a blockade here. So they're literally just stuck in this area. And in Gaza alone, there are 2.1 million Palestinians who live here. If you look at the West Bank, there are actually 463,353 settlers. A settler is somebody who at any time can come. There's actually here in the US something called birthright, where if you are a Jew and you don't even know anything, they will take you for free and you can go look at any home and say, that's the home I want. And then a settlement will be built there. So just to give you an idea what settlements are. So looking at the effects of colonialism and imperialism to this day on Palestinians, they deal with children who are constantly arrested by many soldiers will come in the middle of the night and take a child. The parent has no right, cannot speak, and they will actually question the child if they actually have a stone or anything, or they do anything. Even if they did nothing, they will just take them. And so right to this day, we have over 10,000 children who are arrested still, and they have not been able to see their parents. And this can last for years and years until they're actually able to see a child, their parent. One child recently, who was only 5 years old, was taken from his home. 40 years later, has actually been able to see his dad, as his mom had passed away, wanting to see her son, and died of a broken heart. 96% of the water of Gaza or Gaza Strip is undrinkable. And Israel actually manages that water supply. So at any time they can stop water, stop electricity, and they have no say. There are over 13 million Palestinians worldwide, many of them refugees and stateless. Others actually took on a state or have become part of either American, Australian, British, French, and onward societies. From the 10% Christians of the indigenous Arabs of Palestine, there are less than 3% to this day. So I wanted to talk a little bit about who the Arabs are and the classification within the Arab world. I'm sure you have many questions. I'm just going to ask you to wait to the end because I'm not able to see the chat at this moment, so I apologize for that. So when we look at what is Arab, many times I hear this Arabic man or the Arabian princess. In reality, an Arab is an ethnic identity and not a religion. They'll say Arab is automatically synonymous with Muslim. And later on, you will learn that actually here there are actually over 70% Arab Americans who are Christian and not Muslim. Arabs belong to the Semitic race who originally settled in the Arabian Peninsula, spread across the Middle East, remembering that term coming from the British. It's actually Southwest Asia and Northern Africa. Arabic is a Semitic language, and this is the word here, Arabic. It says al-lugha al-arabiyya, which basically says the Arabic language. It's a Semitic language that is rich and complex as its history. One different letter or intonation can change the meaning of a word drastically. As an adjective, we have Arabic literature. We say Arabic alphabet. We say Arabic calligraphy, music. The first graphic, like I said, is written in Arabic calligraphy and means the Arabic language. Arabian is actually a proper noun and came from the book here, the collection of stories of the Arabian Nights, or we can say the Arabian horse. And if we look again, this is actually my family here. We are Arabs, and this refers to an ethnic ethnic identity, we are the minority, but ethnic identity. So over here, I wanted to go over again Arabic. We have 28 letters in the alphabet. It is a Semitic language, and it is from right to left is how we read. Over here, some Arabic calligraphy. So if you look here, this actually is a poem that is written. And here, this says Milad Majid, which is Merry Christmas, but it is written in Arabic calligraphy. And I wanted you to hear just a little bit of some Arabic music, just so you get an idea of what it sounds like. Hopefully you can.
Righteous mood with some ITIL food. Everything is so tight, gotta get your soul right. It's my liberty to have the agility to educate and elevate about the liberty. The king is the king, whether east or west, or the real king step with his empress. Oh yes, and mine's as fine as wine. And she knew better, she make me do better. Yeah. Snoop Dogg. Yeah. Dance. 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 Dance to the rhythm.
Okay, so you got to hear Arabic music. Now I'd like you to see some Arabic dancing. This is the debke. It's a traditional dance that we actually will perform at any graduation, happy event, wedding. And debke means in Arabic to stomp because we use our feet. So you got an idea about the dancing. Over here, this is a headdress that is used. It's either called a keffiyeh or a shmar. It's basically a traditional headdress which is used to protect you from a sunburn, dust, and or sand. And if you were watching the 2022 World Cup in Qatar, you probably saw a lot of people wearing it based on the flags of the country that they were representing or they were cheering for. Here I wanted to show you, this is actually Palestinian embroidery. You can see this ornate traditional dress known as the thob. This is part of a cultural identity. It is throughout the Middle East / Southwest Asia, North African region. And you can kind of see what she's written here. Don't stop talking about Palestine. Don't stop talking about our folklore. Don't stop showing off our culture, our colors, our music, our food, our embroidery, our art, us. So going back to that word Middle East that was coined by the British, I wanted to talk about a region. The Middle East refers to a region that is linked by a shared location, but not a common language. And that's the key here, that the language is not common. Thus, Arabs are not all Middle Easterners. The Middle East includes non-Arab countries such as Afghanistan, Iran, Pakistan, Turkey, parts of Israel, among others. These countries speak Hebrew, Farsi, Turkish, Urdu, Pashto, Dari, but none of them have Arabic as the official language. Thus, not all Arabs are from the Middle East, but they are all from the Middle East and North African region. We call that MENA, and that's actually the colonized term. It's also now known as SWANA, which is Southwest Asia and North Africa. So I wanted to talk about the Arab world. It's probably hard to see this, but just so you look at this, there are actually 22 countries. And looking here, you can see this is the Gulf, and I'll show you another map after this. This is the Levant region, and this is the Maghreb. So there's 3 regions that we divided. So the Arab world is divided into 3 regions with 22 countries in total spread across this area. We have the Levant. The Levant area is comprised of Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Palestine, and Jordan. We have the Gulf region, which are the Gulf states of Saudi Arabia, Oman, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, and Yemen. And then you have the Maghreb region, which is also the North African region. And that's Egypt, Libya, Algeria, Tunisia, Morocco, Mauritania, Sudan, Djibouti, Somalia, and these are known as the Moon Islands or Comoros Islands. If you look over here, you'll see a little asterisk. This basically means that these are monarchies. So in the Levant, the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan is a monarchy. In Morocco, the Sultanate of Morocco is a monarchy. And all within the Gulf region are monarchies except for Yemen. The rest of them are actually states, and they have presidents that rule them. There are 400 million Arabs living in the Arab world, and it's diverse in terms of people, history, dialects, and local customs. But the official national language of Arabic has different dialects. We have Arabic music, like you got to hear, dance, and even instruments may vary slightly from each region. The countries are heterogeneous in climate and resources. For example, we look at some countries that actually speak more than one language, and these languages like Syria, Morocco, and Lebanon will actually have French as their second language, and you have Jordan, Palestine, and Egypt will have British English as the second language, because that's who had colonized them and created them as mandates. So in the US, we actually have 4 waves of immigration of Arab Americans coming here. The first Arabs that immigrated to America were from Syria and Lebanon, again from the Levant region, in the 1860s. They were Christian and quickly assimilated into American society. The famous Muscle Beach, which you could see over here, has a picture in front of Khouri's Cafe, which is basically a cafe owned by Arabs from Lebanon. The second wave of immigration was in 1940s to 1960s, in which my father was part of, included more Christians, some Muslims, and these were very educated than the last group. These were the lawyers, scientists, engineers, doctors, etc. It was called the brain depletion of the Arab world. The third wave of immigration began in the 1970s and was comprised of Arabs fleeing their homes from war and persecution, such as in Iraq, Syria, Egypt, Lebanon, and Palestine. And the last wave of immigration starting in 2000s has been met with a lot of issues as anti-Arab sentiment and anti-Arab American sentiments and negative stereotypes continue to bombard Arab immigration. So for decades, Arab Americans have been forced to self-identify as white. So our experiences are basically whitewashed. Half my identity is missing the minute I mark white on the US demographic survey or census. There are currently 3.7 million Arab Americans that reside predominantly in New York, Michigan, California, Florida, and Texas. But of course, it's hard to know if other states have high populations of Arab Americans due to the white designation for our race. Moroccans, Egyptians, Sudanese, and other Afro-Arabs in Northern Africa self-identify as African American, as they don't feel they belong to the Caucasian European American race. Think of Lopez Lemong, an Olympic athlete who was Sudanese American. Because he speaks Arabic or comes from the Arab region, the US Census and demographic surveys require him to mark the white category. So this right here is an example. And as you can see, white is where we have to identify because there is no Arab listed here or MENA. And so I wanted to show you quickly this video that kind of explains that Arabs, really Arab Americans, have to check this box and what actually happens when they do.
They're white. Now, let's first. The last time Mohammed Abdullah went through TSA security, he didn't necessarily reap any of that sweet white privilege. There's actually a history behind this categorization. It dates back to the 1880s and 1890s when Arabs first began immigrating to the US from present-day Lebanon and Syria. They settled in Boston, Detroit, and New York, establishing restaurants, businesses, and newspapers. But unlike Irish, Italian, and Portuguese immigrants, these newcomers didn't come from Europe. They came from Asia, at a time when white Americans felt that Asians would take their jobs. The Chinese Exclusion Act barred Asian immigrants from becoming citizens. In fact, up until 1952, generally only white people were eligible to become American citizens. And so Arabs went to court and fought several cases arguing they should be classified as white. And they won. Now, back then, being white came with a lot of perks, kind of like today. And so Arabs who sought white identification did so to avoid discrimination in public life and to be treated better than non-white minorities. But fast forward to today's post-9/11 America. Arabs are discriminated against regularly at airports and courts, by the government, and by the police. Many feel they're not treated as full American citizens, let alone white. So you might be asking, why does a box on the census even matter? Well, for one, having better data on the US population gives us a more complete picture of how diverse the country is becoming. And policymakers can potentially better serve the needs of their constituencies if they know more about them. The Arab American population has basically been invisible and hasn't gotten the benefits of having federal minority status. That's why during the 2010 census, activists encouraged folks to check it right, you ain't white. They argue.
So you can kind of see this is part of identity erasure. Over here, it talks about an Afro-Arab who basically had to say that she was white. And she highlights it with, my experience highlights the absurdity of US racial classifications. The US Census Bureau classifies all Arabic speakers as white. As an Afro-Arab, am I Black enough to be considered racially Black in America? And this is a Sudanese American Hind Mekki. In the 2020 US Census survey, many Arab Americans voiced their concern for the lack of MENA or SWANA as an available selection under race. Even Palestinian American and US Representative Rashida Tlaib attempted to push for this new addition on the US Census, emphasizing how the white designation they currently have that they have to select robs them from their rich ethnic heritage. However, she was unsuccessful, and Arab Americans continue to be underrepresented and classified as white. Years of undercounting have deprived Arab Americans from basic services. In addition, since federal funding for research is awarded based on population data, and Arab Americans are lumped with white data, there's no medical or health-related data collection for this group. There are no opportunities for patient-centered care. There's no medical research funding to understand the health of Arab Americans and the communities in which they live. Arab communities in the US have actually high significant COVID factors, according to Arab American physicians, nurses, and scientists, but it's difficult to understand how many Arab Americans and other people with roots in the MENA region have been impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. Besides basic services for healthcare in an educational setting alone, Arab American students are classified as white and compete with other white students for class ranking, university admissions based on race, and other opportunities provided to minority students. So with this, I wanted to go over some of the themes in Arab culture. There are 4 themes that can be found across the Arab world that are not shared in other Middle Eastern countries. And these are family, community, hospitality, and faith. Looking at theme 1, part of an Arab's identity and honor is the family's name that they hold. In fact, Arab families are quite large with different branches of the same family known as the tribe. Each patriarch outside of the ancestral country is responsible for updating the tree and keeping the mayor of the village abreast so that the original colorful tree is updated. In this manner, we preserve our family names and keep our history alive. For example, my maiden name is Horani or Horani, but the main family tree is Marji. So over here, this is, trying to move this over, you can see the Marji family tree. And one of these is Horani, and each of these leaves represents a person, and from there it branches out. Since my father is the patriarch of the Marji family, he's the one who's always calling and updating this tree and letting the mayor of Irbid know who the new children are and how the families have grown. In the same token, the Arabic naming system has a regularity of its own, although it may have variations related to country of origin, religion, culture, among other factors. Each Arab name is diverse and deeply rooted in history. My name means light in Arabic. I, just like other Arabs, can trace my great 5 times 6 grandparents, since the Arabic system for naming, and you can look over here, is first name, which is my name, Noura, my father's name, my grandfather's name, great-grandfather, great times 3 times 4 times 5 on until we can get our last name, which here is Horani. The most important thing is how we name also the fathers. So a father is nicknamed father of. Abu means father, and then the eldest son or daughter, if there are no sons, will be then next. So my father's name is Abu Layth because Layth is my brother and he is the eldest son of the family. Respecting our elders is first and foremost. The eldest of the family is known as the patriarch of the family and is visited by all members of the family during religious and national holidays. Members of the family will kiss the hand when greeting him. Food is also integral to a family's gathering. Small plates allow for communal sharing so that family and friends gather around a table to discuss rather than stare at each other's plates. This allows for meaningful conversations and fellowship. And oral literature, as you can see right here, is passed on from generation to generation so that the new generation does not lose sight of the ancestral homeland. So here we are kind of kissing the elders of our family. Our second one is community. Connecting Arabs to their culture is part of their daily lives. They love to cultivate the land they have and share the fruits of their labor with their community. It's not uncommon to have Arab Americans today growing their own fruits and vegetables in their yard. My parents actually take pride in their olive tree and a variety of fruit trees in their backyard. They share them with us and their extended family members, church, and neighbors. And this helps actually meet the needs of the community. As well, we talk about education. Education for us remains the top of meeting the needs. It's viewed as one's passport in life. Those who have it have the respect of the community. And some common Arab American professions include doctors, lawyers, engineers, accountants, and salespeople. You'll actually have an abundance of these. When a student graduates, the family shares sweets with their community as a way of sharing their joy and letting their community know of their child's accomplishments. For example, in Jordan, the high school exit exam, known as the Tawjihi, will actually let a student know where they're going to go. Based on this score, they are eligible to attend a certain college of their choice. This adds to the joy when they get into their profession. Our celebrations can actually last weeks and weeks with music being heard from every household. And there are currently 40% of Arab Americans that hold at least a bachelor's degree compared to 24% of the general US population. The third theme I want to go over is hospitality. A host providing food and drink is typical when a guest visits your home or business, whether in the Arab region or here even in America. The guests are like family and we treat them with utmost respect. Many of our homes will have the Ahlan wa Sahlan plaque, which basically means welcome, to remind guests that they are our family. Part of the norms is accepting this hospitality, and declining even a cup of tea would result in offending the Arab or the Arab American. I recall actually how far this hospitality goes, not only with food. I remember that I went to my cousin's house in Jordan and complimented her friend on her bracelet. All of a sudden, the friend took off the bracelet and said, "Get them in," and took it off. I didn't know what that meant, and she became offended that I wouldn't take it. Sure enough, I learned that the next time you tell someone that you like their article of clothing or jewelry, don't say it because you'll end up taking it. Okay, going back to some of the common foods that you may find in the Arab culture. They have the same ingredients with different variations, and names may change based on regional dialect, but all Arabs have these staples as cuisine. So if you go to any Arab restaurant or Mediterranean restaurant, you'll be able to find some of these foods. Certain foods are associated with special occasions, and these traditions are passed on from generations. I wanted to talk a little bit about some Arab Muslim and Arab Christian traditional dishes that are made during their religious holidays. Each one holds special significance. Here, this is called awama, and this right here is used during theophany. And what it is, it's very sweet, and we make this on January 6th of every year as we celebrate theophany, or when Jesus was baptized in the Jordan River. Right here, this is ma'mul. This actually is used by both Muslims and Christians, but for Christians, this represents the tomb of Christ. And so what we do is we make sure that as soon as it's Pascha or our Easter, we would take these out and everybody remembers that Christ was in a tomb and then the rock was rolled away and he was resurrected. At the same time, this also represents the sponge that was given to Christ on the cross when he asked for something to drink and they gave him the sponge with vinegar. Over here, this is gatayef. These are actually made during Ramadan, and as soon as they're able to eat, they're actually given these. Right here, this is ka'ak. Arab Christians will use this during Pascha. It represents the crown of thorns that was placed on Christ's head during the Passions and during his crucifixion. And this right here looks like Turkish delights. It's known as raha. It helps those who are fasting to be able to break the fast without hurting their stomach or having serious diarrhea. So raha is very good, and raha actually means rest. The last thing I want to talk about as far as our themes is faith. Arabs are a people who encompass all religious faiths, but the three Abrahamic religions are predominantly practiced there. And these are Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Even these three religions have subtle differences, but all of them believe in one God. The Jews, Christians, and Muslims all believe in Al-Ilah, which is short for Allah. These messages they preach are similar as well. For the Jews, the Messiah is coming. For the Christians, the Messiah, or Masih in Arabic, came and will come again. And for the Muslims, the Messiah is a prophet known as Isa, and Muhammad is the last of the prophets, and it was he who recorded the word of God. Surprisingly enough, 70% of Arab Americans are actually Christian with different denominations, while 30% of Arab Americans are Muslim. Since the three religions follow different calendars, it's important to look at the correct calendar for each religion to determine when their religious holidays happen for that respective year. So the three Abrahamic religions follow different calendars. The Jews follow the luni-solar calendar, and the Christians, we have the Eastern Orthodox Christians, they follow the Julian calendar, while the Western Christians follow the Gregorian calendar. And the Muslims follow the lunar calendar, also referred to as Al-Hijri. So with Christianity in America, the biggest group of Arab American Christians are Eastern Orthodox Christians. And this is followed by the Catholics, who have the Pope as the primate. You have the Maronites from Lebanon, the Melkite Greek Catholics from Syria and parts of Jordan, and the Chaldeans of Iraq. There are also Egyptian Copts and Syriac Orthodox. This timeline shows the early church that is considered the only church in the New Testament that was established by Christ in 33 AD, before the Great Schism in 1054, when the Roman Catholic Church began through the Protestant Reformation that began in 1517. And a fun fact for you, when my father retired as a senior mechanical engineer, he found his calling as a priest in the Antiochian Orthodox Church. So that right there is my dad. This right here is the timeline I spoke of. So this is the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, and it's found in the New Testament, established by Christ. And in 1054, the Roman Catholic Church broke away from this church. From there, we also have the Protestant Reformation and all the different sects that you'll find here. Talking about Islam, Muslims and Arabs are two different classifications of people. 30% of Arab Americans are Muslim. Of the 10 countries that have the largest Muslim populations, I wanted you to look here, only Egypt, Algeria, and Morocco are Arab countries. The densely and most largest Muslim populations are found in Indonesia, which is actually in Southeast Asia, Pakistan, then is followed by India, Bangladesh, and onwards. So if we look here, you could see that the second largest is Pakistan, which is non-Arab. First largest is Indonesia, also non-Arab. And fifth largest takes you to an Arab country, which is Egypt. There are two main branches of Islam. You have the Sunni and the Shia. There's also a very small group of Druze Muslims. The majority of Arab American Muslims are Sunni, with a very small percentage of Shia and Druze Muslims in the United States. And Muslims follow fasting, prayer, and reflection. Also, we can see that there are some Arab American Jews. Besides the Christians and Muslims, there's a very small percentage of Arab American Jews who migrated from Egypt and the Levant region. These Jews are called Mizrahi or Sephardic Jews. But with the establishment of Israel in 1948, many have dropped the Arabic language and have assimilated into Israeli life. The Passover, also called Pesach, is a major Jewish holiday that celebrates the exodus of the Israelites from slavery in Egypt. The Passover occurs on the 15th day of the Hebrew month of Nisan, or the first month of Aviv, or spring. So those are the three Abrahamic religions. And I know I'm going through this quickly, but we're so limited with time. I wanted to talk a little bit about now how Arab Americans are represented in the media. And this is kind of an implicit way of keeping that imperialism and colonialism alive. So when we talk about representation, we need to talk about Orientalism. Palestinian American author and professor Edward Said coined the word Orientalism. Orientalism is a general patronizing Western attitude towards Middle Eastern or Southwest Asian and North African societies. The West will depict these societies as barbaric, mysterious, and underdeveloped. It is also the idea that Western society is developed, rational, flexible, and superior, thus allowing Western imagination to see Eastern cultures and people as alluring and mysterious, and as a threat to the Western civilization. It keeps Western audiences believing that the uncivilized barbaric Arabs and those from the Orient will need the West to intervene at any time, save them, and liberate them. This keeps colonialism and power alive and well today. I hope we have enough time. Should I continue with, okay.
All over it. The attack in Oklahoma City appears to have a familiar mark.
This was done with the attempt to inflict as many casualties as possible. That is a Middle Eastern trait.
The fact that it was such a powerful bomb in Oklahoma City immediately drew investigators to consider deadly parallels that all have roots in the Middle East.
ABC News has learned that the FBI has asked the U.S. military to provide up to 10 Arabic speakers to help in the investigation.
Well, one of the interesting things about the persistence of Orientalism, I mean, almost, when you think about it, almost astonishing persistence of it was the Oklahoma City bombing in April of 1995. I can give you a personal example. I was in Canada giving some lectures at the actual time of the bombing. And maybe half an hour after the event had occurred in the afternoon, my office was inundated with phone calls from the media. And I rang my office from Canada, as I frequently do, to find out.
Could you turn up the volume on that?
If there was any message for me that
needed
attention and so on. And she said 25 calls had come in from the major networks, from the cable channels, from the major newspapers, news magazines, and so on and so forth, all of them wanting to talk to you. And I said, what about this event in Oklahoma City? And I said, well, what does that have to do with anything? Well, apparently somebody had volunteered, one of these instant commentators, that the notion that this seemed like a Middle East-style bombing and that there were a couple of swarthy people around right after the bombing, or seen after the bombing.
Within hours of the explosion.
So sorry, we're just going to try to make this as loud as we can make it. There we go. A little bit of tech support.
What's she doing now?
Trying to make it louder.
Let's try that again.
All over it.
Orientalism, covering Islam, and the question of Palestine. He believes that finding a peaceful...
I wanted to kind of go back to
1995. I can give you a personal example. I was in Canada giving some lectures at the actual time of the bombing. And maybe half an hour after the event had occurred in the afternoon, my office was inundated with phone calls from the media. And I rang my office from Canada, as I frequently do, to find out, if there was any message for me that needed attention and so on. And she said 25 calls had come in from the major networks, from the cable channels, from the major newspapers, news magazines, and so on and so forth, all of them wanting to talk to you. And I said, what about this event in Oklahoma City? And I said, well, what does that have to do with anything? Well, apparently somebody had volunteered, one of these instant commentators, that the notion that this seemed like a Middle East-style bombing and that there were a couple of swarthy people around right after the bombing, or seen after the bombing.
Within hours of the explosion, local police and the FBI had issued the all-points bulletin looking for 3 men believed to be of Middle Eastern origin.
And sources tell CBS News that unofficially, the FBI is treating this as a Middle Eastern-related incident.
Oklahoma City, I can tell you, is probably considered one of the largest centers of Islamic radical activity outside the Middle East.
And so this got them to think that they should talk to me, not because I had anything to do with it, because by virtue of being from the Middle East, I would have an inside insight into this. You know, and of course the proposition is so preposterous and so racist that just if you're from the area, you would understand who and why this is being done. Never thinking for a moment that it was a local homegrown boy called McVeigh who was, you know, totally American in his outlook and was doing it out of the best principles of American extermination and Ahab-like anger, you know, at the world.
Okay, so hopefully you were able to hear that. I wanted to look again at Orientalism that Edward Said had spoken of. And there is this fetishization of Mina or Swana culture and people and their people, which is demonstrated through the concept of Orientalism. Arabs are constantly shown through the media, but are constantly portrayed inaccurately. With this fetishization, we see non-Arabs will dress in attire significant to the people of the region, and they romanticize the desert since it's so mysterious and full of wonder. Arabs are considered to be exotic in the eyes of the West. If a white person were to wear an article of clothing significant to this culture, they would not be ridiculed. However, that same attire would get an Arab stopped at the airport and discriminated against and being a terrorist. So here's this video of just explaining quickly about Oriental.
Today we're going to be exploring a book that changed how we look at history, entertainment, and our heroes and villains. Wait, no, I mean this one. Orientalism.
Crimson Jihad will rain fire on one major US city each week.
Orientalism is a term brought to prominence by this guy, Edward Said, in 1978. He argued that Europeans and Americans constructed images of the Orient that includes Asian and Arab countries that were self-serving. Images that reduced the Orient to projections that lived in the white man's imagination. Violent, stuck in the past, sensual, exotic, monstrous, mysterious, and other.
You want to know what the business world thinks of you? We think 100 years ago you were living out here in tents in the desert chopping each other's heads off, and that's exactly where you're going to be in another 100.
This is it?
I know we all loved Aladdin as kids, but it was basically a huge Orientalist fantasy and was so popular it's now become a live-action film featuring Will Smith in blueface. Seriously, what were they thinking? Its depictions of Arabs was racist as hell, from the extreme poverty to the idea of a bloodthirsty Arab man and the submissive yet seductive Arab woman.
Where they cut off your ear if they don't like your face. It's barbaric, but hey, it's home.
These images present a narrative of how the Western world sees itself, superior and rational.
The West is indisputably the freest, the cleanest, the fairest civilization in history. That's why so many immigrants want to move here.
And everyone else as mysterious and inferior, if not outright barbaric. Well, these Arabs don't care if we kill each other. They're not going to interfere in our business.
What are you doing?
It's Indiana Jones.
This is not the Australian Bachelor.
It works to weave a story that the West is bringing civilization and grace to the rest of the world, saving them from themselves. Said said these images strip people from the Orient of their humanity. He also argued these projections functioned like a self-serving loop. You invade and conquer a people because you believe they're barbaric, and then you hope to civilize them in your own image because now you find them exotic, sensual, and in need of your help.
American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger.
It paints how we all talk about the Middle East, the Muslim world, and the so-called Orient. And we see the impacts of that on politics and real people's lives.
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States.
These ideas have been perpetuated in the politics, art, music, movies, religion, and military adventures that have underpinned the West's relationship with the Orient. Over 40 years on, Edward Said's explanation of how media and colonialism intersect is still as relevant as ever. We should keep this in mind when we try and differentiate between authentic portrayals of the Middle East and outdated, racist, and Orientalist fantasies.
Okay, and then one more, if there's time to show you. Okay, this is how does it feel to be a stereotype?
From the beginning of Western speculation about the Orient, the one thing the Orient could not do was represent itself. Evidence of the Orient was credible only after it had passed through the refining fire of the Orientalist work. Edward Said, Palestinian intellectual, literary theorist, historian of the colonial narrative. Said explained how colonialism works, not just through armies, but through literature. Not just through conquest, but through anthropology. Not just through oppression, but justified through narrative. He showed how the West painted a picture of the East. Snake charmers, belly dancers, thieves, the exotic, the sensual, the depraved. Said saw it in 19th century Western literature, and you can see it across modern culture. Switch on the news, read the newspapers, look at the images. What stories are you being told? Us versus them. The rational versus the irrational. Civilization versus barbarism. Africans, corrupt despots, starving victims. Latin Americans, drug lords, football players, dictators. Arabs, terrorists, misogynists. Asians, software engineers, religious fanatics. How does it feel to be fixed, captured, framed? Think of Orientalism as a lens. Use it when you read the media. Spot the stereotype, decode the fiction, unlearn the myth.
Okay, so that's Orientalism, but I wanted to show you now in our media. The anti-Arab perception is perpetuated with American media and also Western media that places this invisible minority in a negative, visible way. We are depicted in movies and commercials as oil sheikhs, and belly dancers, camel jockeys, and barbaric, uncivilized people. Simple original lyrics to the opening song of Disney's Aladdin was, "Oh, I come from a land from a faraway place where the caravan camels roam, where they cut off your ear if they don't like your face. It's barbaric, but hey, it's home." After a huge outcry from the American Arab Anti-Discriminatory Committee, Disney then changed the lyrics to, "Oh, I come from a land from a faraway place where the caravan camels roam. Where it's flat and immense and the heat is intense. It's barbaric, but hey, it's home," noting that they refused to remove the word barbaric. And at the same time, when you want to look for graphics or you just Google an image of an Arab, this is what you'll find. In Canva alone, when I wanted to look for just one graphic, this is what I found: a Muslim in traditional attire and covered with the hijab. Over here, it's that desert scene. This, of course, Aladdin. And then here is a commercial where there's always going to be a camel in the desert. And here is the Arab, the uncivilized Arab wearing traditional attire. So I don't know if we'll be able to hear this one. I'm going to try, but I wanted you just to see how Hollywood will vilify Arabs in different movies. film, not just films, but also TV shows. So we're going to try this. If you can't hear it, I'm going to have this uploaded to you guys so you'll be able to see it later.
When we think of Arabs, what do we see? What images come to mind? Arabs are the most maligned group in the history of Hollywood. They're portrayed basically as subhuman. Where's the mother? We know the mythology. The mythology, namely Hollywood's images of Arabs.
You are late.
1,000 apologies, oh patient one.
You have it then.
I had to slit a few throats, but I got it.
Disney's Aladdin was seen by millions of children worldwide. It was hailed as one of Disney's finest accomplishments. But the film recycled every old degrading stereotype from Hollywood's silent black and white past.
Oh, I come from a land, from a faraway place, where the caravan camels roam. Where they cut off your ear if they don't like your face. It's barbaric, but hey, it's home.
The Arab is one-dimensional caricature, cartoon cutouts used by filmmakers as stock villains and as comic relief. And so over and over we see Arabs in movies portrayed as buffoons, their only purpose being to deliver cheap laughs.
I have a weakness for blondes and women without mustaches.
All the stereotypes are here. Too rich and stupid to know the value of money.
Get me 12 sweets. Better yet, the entire floor.
And of course he's oversexed, lecherous, uncontrollably obsessed with the American woman.
Here, my desert blossom. Give the change. Have you ever considered joining a harem?
And over again they're portrayed as inept. So, in a movie like True Lies, not only are the Arabs dangerous, they're also incompetent.
Aye, we are all prepared to die. With one turn of that key, 2 million of your people will die instantly. What key? That key! Who's taking the key?
I mean, this is ridiculous. I mean, why does Hollywood inject Arabs, scenes of Arabs, and or slurs demeaning Arabs in movies having nothing to do with the Middle East?
Every night I was forced to perform unspeakable acts with circumcised dogs.
Oh, dogs are better than sheep. They're cleaner. I know. I've tried both.
So you're sitting like I am, for example, watching Back to the Future about a mad scientist. And yet, early on in the film, we see these ugly, inept Libyans with machine guns in a parking lot trying to gun down the protagonist. I mean, why? This movie wasn't about the future. It was the same old stereotyping from the past. I'm an optimist and I believe in the future, particularly in young filmmakers. The stereotype will change. I think whenever we see anyone being vilified on a regular basis, we have to speak out, whether we're image makers or not. We have to take a stand and say this is morally and ethically wrong to demonize a people.
And just one more again.
Villain.
And then there are music videos where Orientalist images have been pervasive for a long time, but it's not as discussed as it is in other art forms. Which brings us back to Bodak Yellow's music video, where Cardi B shows up in Dubai, so mysterious, so rich, dresses up in Arab garb, so sensual, so exotic, has a pet cheetah, which is dangerous, rides a camel across the desert, aka every Arab's backyard apparently. Okay, so maybe Cardi has never even read Edward Said and may not even know what we're talking about. But in her defense, she's not the only one doing it. There are plenty of other examples of musicians using Orientalist images in today's music videos.
I see it as a form of sort of silencing. It's a form of erasure of a culture. It's oversimplification. And people have a right to be insulted by that, and they have a right to protest it and demand that they be treated with a little more respect.
So what will it take to ensure that we stop exoticizing Arabs and Muslims in our movies, TV shows, and favorite music videos? Love you, Cardi B. Growing up, whenever I watched Aladdin, I was...
And then here, just to hear from them.
We're kind. If we want to hug you, it doesn't mean that we're going to kill you. You can hug us back.
If you go to anybody's home who's from that background, you will find a lot of food. You're greeted with food.
Yes.
And tea.
Yes. Moroccan tea.
Family.
Yeah.
Family is important in the Middle East.
It's really important. The connection.
Yeah.
Diversity. I mean, look, different shades, different shapes.
Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed another edition of The Stereotypes, and this one was on Arabs reacting to stereotypes. Tell me, where...
So just looking here, social conditioning has shaped the evolution of scapegoating, stereotyping, and prejudice against Arab Americans, which has also affected the intercultural relations in American public schools. A simple Google search for Arab will show you this. Notice the traditional, there's the camel always there, the traditional headdress that I was showing you. That's the image that you'll be able to see. After 9/11, it only got worse for Arab Americans. For me, just like many Arab Americans of different generations, I know what it's like to be the butt of terrorist jokes and how my own brother's husband and father frequently random selected and searched by the TSA every time we travel. Personally, I once overheard a group of educators in the teacher's lounge at one of the schools I previously worked at that referred to me as this, and that I should go back to my country because I'm a terrorist who is going to bomb the school. You have also heard of Allahu Akbar, but the media plays a vital role in teaching others that this phrase is associated with a violent act. In reality, this actually means God is greatest, being Allah means God, Akbar being greatest. We also say Insha'Allah or Inshallah, and that means God willing or if God wills it. Although it hurt, I brushed it off to ignorance and lack of knowledge, not to fault them, but to blame the images they see on TV, in movies, video games, and certain lyrics that approve the targeting of Arab Americans. Somehow it seemed to be socially accepting as part of patriotism to bully or hate us because we are seen as the uncivilized enemy of America, us versus them. Over here, I wanted just to show you a graduate student and how the student is being targeted.
Every time she's boarding a flight to reunion in the U.S.
It was just very, very traumatic. They opened up everything. They removed everything, my bras, my underwears. They just would like hold it up. They would go through it. And I literally at that moment, I remember I just wanted to melt into a puddle because it's just so humiliating. At the grand scheme of things, we just looked back and said that we wish you had never taken this trip. You never know if you're gonna ever make your flight, if you're gonna miss it, if they're gonna take you in the back room and ask you questions, or if they're even gonna arrest you one day. I won't even be surprised if that happens. I just have to be prepared. If you don't speak up, they will, and they'll change your story. So that's what I'm trying to do.
Even the latest Ukraine crisis shed light on the media depiction of Arab refugees as being uncivilized and did not take into account that there are actually some indigenous Arab Christians as well.
Some of the media coverage of the conflict in Ukraine has been kind of off. We have reporters and pundits making some rather awful remarks about the nature of this conflict and these refugees versus, say, conflicts and refugees in the Middle East. First off, Europe has been home to some of the worst wars and worst war crimes in human history. I mean, the Holocaust. So why this surprise that bad things are happening in Europe? And second, when they say, oh, civilized cities, and in another clip, well-dressed people, and this is not the third world, they really mean white people, don't they? The reason they seem to want us to care more about Ukraine, and we should care about Ukraine, but not because they're white Europeans. That shouldn't be the reason we care about Ukraine.
Yeah, no, that's what's so disturbing in all of this. And in fact, not only that, it's trying to make an excuse why the West should get involved and embrace these refugees and help them. Listen, let's be clear. You should encourage and actually help refugees because they are fleeing a war. I don't know if you saw this. There was a op-ed today in the Telegraph. Well, I think we have it. We'll put it up for our viewers to see. This was an op-ed in which the writer, Daniel Hannon, said that these people, the Ukrainians, they're like us. They watch Netflix. They have Instagram accounts. They read uncensored newspaper, and then goes on to say that war is no longer something visited upon impoverished and remote population. Oh no, it's happening to us here in Europe. And to your point, you're absolutely correct. Europe has had some of the worst human rights abuses and atrocities and wars in not just modern history, in all of history.
Okay, and so back to the civilized world and the major backlash it caused flaunting its civility. Social media platforms blew up with the trend uncivilized, starting with Instagram and Twitter, and all shades of brown people shared their selfies and stories with the uncivilized tag to show the world the racism and negative stereotyping will no longer be tolerated. This right here was a tweet that said, the Holocaust, Europe, World Wars, the West, imperialism, the West, colonization, the West. But we are, quote unquote, uncivilized, even though civilization started in Mesopotamia. And right here's this political cartoon of the civilization of Mesopotamia. And here's somebody saying that we're uncivilized. And this is the cradle of civilization. Right here, this is Petra, which is actually a touristic site found in Jordan. And of course, the Great Sphinx and the pyramids of Giza in Egypt. And this is the dome that is found in Jerusalem. Over here, you could see how racism has now become normalized. If you're a soccer fan or a football fan, you were probably watching the FIFA World Cup that was held in Qatar, or Qatar 2022 this summer. And over here, we have just a little tweet to show you how a Danish TV compares Moroccan footballers with monkeys. And at the same time, because this is the Moroccan footballer and he was hugging his mom, he actually likened this with monkeys who are loving and kissing their mom. And this was actually showing that Moroccans are like monkeys. So that's just one, and this is very recent. Also, we have on a German TV channel, they had also the same thing. They criticized the Moroccans through a racist thing by showing a clip of 3 players from Morocco holding their country's flag between them and raising their index fingers, doing this. This is a sign that Muslims have been using for 1400 years during celebrations, as it serves as a reminder of the oneness of God and the affirmation of faith. Welt is one of Germany's most popular TV channels, and during the segment, they said the image of Moroccan players pointing their fingers to the sky has caused irritation because it is the salute the Islamic State uses after their victory. It further suggested that the players did not know the significance of the gesture. Welt further said that the Free Palestine chant by football fans also implies the destruction of Israel, which of course we know is not true. Free Palestine from occupation, colonization, and imperialism. And over here, this was an English fan who caused a lot of stir in the Western world when he said Free Palestine. But here it explains why.
And number 2, Palestine, hurrah!
some people seem to think it's some sort of juxtaposition. A crusader's cross on the face, a Palestinian flag. The cross of St. George is part of the England flag. It doesn't represent anything else. St. George himself was Palestinian. And often the media likes to portray football fans or whoever else in a certain way. And they just build upon these stereotypes. Some of us, you know, can have the position where we want our national team to win the football, and at the same time, we can call for a free Palestine. We can call for an end to injustice. My video sparked a trend because after the very next game, there was another group of England fans who were interviewed on Israeli TV, and one of them grabbed the microphone and shouted "Free Palestine." So, could this be the start of something? Is this a trend? I hope so.
So I wanted to read this poem by Lina Khalaf Tufaha. It's called Running Orders. They call us now before they drop the bombs. The phone rings and someone who knows my first name calls and says in perfect Arabic, "This is David." And in my stupor of sonic booms and glass shattering symphonies still smashing around in my head, I think, do I know any Davids in Gaza? They call us now to say, run. You have 58 seconds from the end of this message. Your house is next. They think of it as some kind of wartime courtesy. It doesn't matter that there's nowhere to run to. It means nothing that the borders are closed and your papers are worthless and mark you only for a life sentence in this prison by the sea. And the alleyways are narrow and there are more human lives packed one against the other more than any other place on earth. Just run. We aren't trying to kill you. It doesn't matter. You can't call us back to tell us the people we claim to want aren't in your house and that there's no one here except you and your children who were cheering for Argentina just now, sharing the last loaf of bread for this week. It doesn't matter that you have children. You live in the wrong place and now is your chance to run to nowhere. Doesn't matter that 58 seconds isn't long enough to find your wedding album or your son's favorite blanket or your daughter's almost completed college application or your shoes or to gather everyone in the house. It doesn't matter what you had planned. It doesn't matter who you are. Prove you're human. Prove you stand on two legs and run. I wanted to thank you, shukran, for listening to me. I hope this presentation allowed you to learn more about your Arab American colleagues, your Arab American friends, and the Arab Americans that are here, as well as the Arabs across the world. I'm hoping that it also allowed you to understand how colonialism and imperialism continues to affect us today. And also another thing, anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism are two different things. Anti-Zionism is against the movement saying that the Jews are the supreme race, when Judaism is actually a religion. So anti-Semitism is not the same as anti-Zionism. And thank you very much. So I want to get to the chat. Oh, no, stop sharing. Would it be important? Okay, here we go. Okay, are there any questions for me? If you'd like to unmute yourselves.
I wrote, we can't, you, instead of saying we can't hear you. That was an hour ago almost.
Oh, you can't hear us? Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, okay, yes, we'll ignore the chat for now. So are there any questions for me? Anything you would like to say? You can unmute yourselves. Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. And this presentation was actually given to the office manager, Jasmine. So if you also have any questions, Sean, you would also be able to reach out to me. Thank you very much. And God bless you. A blessed Sunday. And tomorrow we're back to work. So Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and blessed be often.